Welcome back to our panel discussion, Digital Modernization in DoD's Fourth Estate, sponsored by Leidos here on Federal News Network. My guests today are Pat Flanders, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Health Agency, Frank Konechny, the Chief Technology Officer at the Air Force, Jamie Markole, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Contract Audit Agency, Don Means is the Defense Enclave Services Executive at the Defense Information Systems Agency, Danielle Metz is Principal Director for the Deputy Chief Information Officer for Information Enterprise at the Defense Department, and Doug Jones is the Chief Technology Officer of the Defense Group at Leidos. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And let's get into some of the ways and means by which agencies in the Fourth Estate will actually go about this. And since Danielle earlier said networks is the first priority of this consolidation and optimization, Pat, you are at the Defense Health Agency already into network overhauling, network modernization. Tell us approaches you're taking, and also emphasize this new need for telework, because I think a lot of people believe that even when the crisis is over, more people will be teleworking than perhaps were before. And so what are some of the VPN and other access issues that might come up as we consolidate and optimize?
Yeah, so we are in the process of collapsing 4 separate medical networks into one. And the new one is called the Medical Community of Interest, the MEDCOI. And that's made a huge difference for us. And, you know, that's kind of a microcosm again of what the 4ENO is going to do. And now, for example, in this crisis, when people are trying to come in through gateways externally, it's pretty seamless because there's enterprise gateways that we run. The places in my organization that haven't migrated yet still have the old VPNs in the basements of their buildings, and they're the ones that are having problems, right? So sometimes they can get in, sometimes they can't. They don't use enterprise shared drives to access their data. And so I see just a lot of goodness coming from this as we continue down the road.
And Don, what are some of the technological means you see? I mean, a lot of agencies are talking software-defined networks, which seems to offer a possibility of getting a more uniform look to networks because you can just make an image and deploy it as many times as needed.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think one of the ways that we're going to be able to enable something like software-defined networks is taking a greenfield approach to this so that we're able to actually leverage that type of technology to be more responsive and, again, proactive. And, much to what Pat has said with enabling MEDCOI, that runs over this infrastructure. As we build this out, there are a huge number of benefits to having a uniform, standardized, discoverable, defendable network, right? So that's what we're trying to build from the inside out.
Danielle, what is your view of how the learnings of the current situation will imbue this effort, which started before this and will continue after it? But are there some things that are takeaways from the current situation that will inform this optimization going forward?
So I think the network and the transport layer is definitely foundational for us to be able to do more of the interesting items in terms of collaboration and office suite productivity. So the pandemic has shown that we needed to be able to be on a common platform to be able to collaborate amongst ourselves and the different organizations and DoD components. And in order to be able to do that as quickly as we have, we've been able to provision 3 million accounts in less than 3 weeks. And that's something that Microsoft has never have been able to do with any federal or private enterprise before. But we were successful in doing it because of the fact that we did it in a very flat manner. So it's one tenant. So it's your email at cvr.mil. And so normally when you're with the department, everyone wants to maintain their uniqueness, and that creates and drives some challenges accessing technology more difficult. So I think that shows that there's some trade space to be able to evaluate, do we really need to have as many tenancies or uniqueness? Can we really take a more common use approach to the commercial technology that's available?
Sure. Jamie, some thoughts? units that is part of the fourth estate, but has very unique needs.
Sure. So actually, we at DCAA were pretty well positioned for this telework initiative. And so what we do is we issue every employee a laptop. Our phone is voice over IP, so you can actually make phone calls through your laptop. And even pre-COVID, 20 to 30% of the DCA workforce teleworks on a daily basis. So we felt pretty good about the work at home issues. But what we found in terms of the challenges is just the network congestion piece that the other guests have been alluding to. Our internal circuits just aren't sized for the 100% telework standard that we're currently under. And so we have to go back and look at where we have those choke points internally, try to put resources against that to improve bandwidth, improve circuit capacity. And then, like I alluded to in my earlier comment, some of this is beyond the agency level. It's the national infrastructure. And as you know, for the transition of ones and zeros, it's the weakest link. And so even if we're robust internally, if we run into choke points elsewhere, the customer's going to have a less than optimal experience.
And Frank, I'd like to get your views on, how industry can help, because Air Force is one of those agencies that is big and also dependent on industrial partners. How can that help in an effort that is so deep into the infrastructure like this?
I mean, we had the same issues like everybody else did with VPN, not having enough VPNs and network saturation as well. And we're kind of looking at it from a slightly more aggressive viewpoint now of how can we actually do zero trust capabilities within the new normal that we're trying to get to. So instead of, increasing capacity all over the place and maintaining it, we're looking at now software-defined perimeters and other things, as well as to how we can actually go forward with, this new normal that we have to do, and how we can make it more secure across all of the Air Force. And we have those issues because we have bases all over the world. And, it's like we have different issues in Europe and Asia than we do here in the CONUS. And we still had the virus everywhere. So we had to contend with, connectivity at Europe, which was an issue by itself. We had connectivity in PAC, which is another issue by itself, and how we'd actually would go forward with everything that we're doing right now. So, everybody's going down the same path as what is the new normal going to be? What is, what our capacity should be? And then what mobility do we expect of our airmen right now? And what do we expect in the future?
Doug, what are the big pain points that are being expressed to you as on the industry side?
I think, a lot of the speakers, and Frank hit it, is it is that scalability and that resiliency, and then balancing that with security, right? So we still, especially given the missions we're talking about, are absolutely critical and a heavy target, right, of our adversaries, that we have to be really careful and mindful of that security and finding that balance. And I think that's where, as Don talked about, trying to go greenfield and modernize some of these pieces and bring in SDN, starting to accelerate some of those zero trust concepts and understanding how do we segment out the traffic and what goes through what policy enforcement points or security points versus what doesn't based on the nature of traffic. It doesn't make sense to do a bunch of packet capture for video streaming because you're not going to really get as much into it, or things that are default encrypted that you can't decrypt. So how do we do a better job of understanding that and balancing those choke points so that we know where our choke points are and we get some flexibility about how to manage those? So I think those are a lot of the critical concepts that sort of bring together software-defined networking, the resiliency, and zero trust in your security concepts. I think those are all going to hit together as we look at doing this. And I think, what Don and Danielle talked about the foundation that we're laying, that DIS is putting together, I think is absolutely critical to enable us to be successful given this new normal.
And when you discuss those concepts, there seems to even be a bigger picture implied here, and that is all of those functions and control of the cybersecurity and the network allocations and the bandwidth allocations that have to happen can all be abstracted in some kind of a central system, so that the agencies doing the mission maybe can have greater focus, let's say less worry about nuts and bolts, if you will, and more focus, more bandwidth of the mind available to their missions. Danielle, is that something that is underlying a lot of this?
Absolutely. And I think it's also driven in the fact that a lot of the DAFAs have technical burden on their networks. And so therefore, we've not been able to modernize and do all of what has been described with software-defined network or zero trust, because that requires to have a robust infrastructure to which they didn't have the investments, the capital investments needed. And so I think that's the fallacy with reform activities writ large, is that you think that you're going to do something to save money, but in order to have a return of investment, you have to have an investment. And that's the very calculated strategy that the CAO has done and worked with the mission partners of those DAFAs as well as with DISA to be able to create the funding strategy to get the capital investment so that we could do all the wonderful things that the panelists have described. The network is just one piece of it. The services that ride atop the network, the collaboration capabilities, the ability to do DevSecOps in the cloud. We haven't even gotten there yet, but those are what's really driving us to do that. So we're starting from square one, and then we have a way to be able to build up to get to all the cool things you want to do with technology. We're just not there yet, but we have a plan to get there.
Yeah, Pat, that strikes me as analogous to what is going on with the health record systems. It will eventually replace something that has had its own instance in each medical center, but they weren't all that well interconnected under the old system, the VISTA system. What you're looking at is a single system that is across the entire health enterprise, including Veterans Affairs and the Coast Guard for that matter. And it strikes me that that's analogous to what's happening in some of these other areas where you have rather, a common instance that can be spun up as needed using clouds and so forth, but everyone is on the same sheet of music.
Yeah, that's right. And the order that you do it makes a difference. And so the software that we're using, like you said, is distributed. So every hospital, every large hospital has a bunch of servers in their basement, and they're all their own little island of the truth. And when a person goes to retire, we have to pull in the information from all those instances. Well, what our new electronic health record is a centralized. There's only one on the planet in one data center where everybody comes into it at the same time. And the enabler for that is a network. Right? When it's in your basement, you're on the LAN. When it's centralized, you're going through the wide area network on the internet to get to it. And so those circuits have to be fast. And so that's what we're doing. We're modernizing the network to enable the EHR and a whole bunch of other things.
Don, that sounds like that falls into your bailiwick.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the fun stuff, right? That's what we do well at DISA. Certainly, we've cut our teeth on delivering infrastructure, and quite frankly, this COVID crisis has also helped us develop that public-private partnership to be able to enable a robust infrastructure to be able to do things like cloud environments or data centers where we don't have one-offs in our basement. And so, we're looking forward to the challenge, and I think we're able to do it.
Doug, I wanted to ask you about because this has come up several times, the cyber aspects of this, and maybe we're getting close to the break, but we'll ask you and then maybe ask Danielle afterwards. But the Defense Department has several cyber hygiene initiatives going on now. None of them get exactly fantastic marks from the auditors overlooking it, and yet it's so important because, especially as people operate on common systems, you probably need a common approach to cyber and cyber hygiene. Thoughts on how that can be baked into this optimization?
Yeah, I think Danielle hit it, which is important, was a lot of the agencies haven't had the capital investment to do the modernization, and part of the cyber hygiene goes part and parcel with the modernization. As you have older legacy infrastructure, it's harder to keep that hygiene up with them, and some of them are even out of support, right? So the idea of pulling this together and then also centralizing that ability to be able to, like you said earlier, almost like the SDM, push out those images so people can rapidly adopt it and we can roll them out and get that consistency. The power of this optimization, as Danielle brought up, is the ability to accelerate that cyber hygiene initiative and improve that sort of raise the floor for all of us from a cyber perspective. It also makes it easier to connect into our defensive cyber operations places. So we can centralize, get a view of that data across holistically and see where adversaries are coming at it from multiple angles, trying to attack us. And we may not know because everyone's looking at their individual silo. Now we're going to do a better job about looking across that and be able to connect those dots. So we're raising the floor as well as enhancing our visibility, our ability to effectively monitor those networks and look for where those adversaries are coming at us.
Yeah, Danielle, it sounds as if it's not just a cyber hygiene itself, but actual cybersecurity.
Absolutely. And I think just to add to what Doug was stating, is the fact that now we have DISA as a single service provider for common use ITs. So Cyber Command Joint Force Headquarters DoDN can look to DISA to be responsible for the DAFAs for the DoD net. And not have to hunt and figure out who's responsible for what on the multitude of networks that currently exist today. And so that goes hat in hand with the ability to ensure that we have better cyber hygiene, just knowing what is on the network, who's responsible for what's on the network, and then reporting it accordingly to Joint Force Headquarters, DoDN, and Cyber Command.
Okay, that's a good place to stop and take a break. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This discussion is Digital Modernization in DoD's Fourth Estate, sponsored by Leidos here on Federal News Network.